Let's prepare ourselves for the Word of God this morning. And we are going to be taking our assignment from the Gospel of John, the 5th chapter. And I'll be reading from the New King James Version, beginning at verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the waters. Then whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had already been there in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. Verse 5. There was a certain man there who had infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, he knew he had already been there in that condition a long time. He said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" I'd like to speak this morning on the subject of deliverance from dysfunction. Deliverance from dysfunction. The story here in the Gospel of John is a somewhat strange story. It appears only in the Gospel of John. And it tells of a situation where there was a certain pool and a bunch of sick people gathered around the pool. And the tradition was that an angel would come down. We don't know how often, how regular, but the angel would do something to the water, stir up the waters. And the first one in got healed. It's somewhat of a strange story, but it gives a lot of insight to the condition of people. The Gospel of John, being the unique gospel that it is, actually does some very peculiar things with the whole idea of water. It's mentioned throughout the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John opens up with John the Baptist baptizing people in water. In the 2nd chapter, we read about Jesus turning water into wine. In the 3rd chapter, he speaks to Nicodemus, and he says, "Except a man is born of water and of spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God." You get to the 4th chapter, and he's at a well. And he's speaking to a woman about the living waters. And then here, he finds many people gathered around the water waiting for healing. You keep going in the 6th chapter, Jesus is walking on the water. In the 7th chapter, he makes a statement If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. So all through the gospel, there's this idea of water. It's even in the crucifixion. It is only in the Gospel of John that he utters the words, I am thirsty. Now we see the living waters emptying himself for you and I. It's in the Gospel of John that it mentions when they pierced him in the side, immediately blood and water came out. So John seems to be doing something unique and peculiar, particular, with the idea of water. In the 4th chapter and the 5th chapter, there seems to be a similarity because they are both focused on the wrong water. She's talking about getting nourishment from the well. Jesus says, he who believes in me, as the scriptures said, from his innermost beings will flow rivers of living waters. The man by the pool thinks his healing is in the water. So here the woman and this man are focusing on the wrong waters. We're talking about dysfunction, and when we speak of dysfunction, we immediately go to the idea of dysfunctional families. It's a common part of our American culture, our language, our lingo. When I think of dysfunctional families, I'm reminded of the story of the ugly duckling. Many people remember that story. Right? It's a story about a family of ducks, and there's one kind of strange looking duck, and everybody makes fun of him. He's different from the others, and then one day he looks into the water and he is a beautiful swan and lives happily ever after, only to get blown out of the sky. I'm a sick man. Well, I never quite understood the story of the ugly duckling because I wasn't the brightest kid on the block, but I'm like, how did the duck turn into a swan? I mean, I get the story and I get the message and it's a sweet story, but how did the duck turn into a swan? And then, as I learned, no, the duck didn't turn into a swan. The duck was always a swan, but he didn't realize it. So I'm like, now I get it. Dysfunctional families is where a home environment where conflicts and misbehaviors are constant and customary. It's basically when something is wrong, something's not working as it is designed to. It has all the appearances of something that should work, but there's just something that's a little twisted, something that's just not operating the way it's supposed to. In our culture, we have been exposed to the dysfunctional family through TV and reality TV. And it becomes so much part of our culture where it starts to become the norm. It starts to become the regular. Now, most people have somewhat of dysfunctional families. And as we think, we may be recalling our own families and members of our families. We will wonder, yeah, there's a little bit of dysfunction going on there. Well, most families are not like the Waltons or like the Cosby kids, where everybody says goodnight to each other, and the biggest crime is bouncing on the bed too hard or something like that. So we all have these kinds of things happening in our families and amongst the people that we interact with. And we all have those family secrets, those things that are peculiar, particular to our families, that nobody talks about. And understand, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. We as all flawed people have our quirks, have our ways, have our dark sides to us. And so we're not saying that it's proper to come and air your dirty laundry in public. You're not expected to talk about the crazy aunt and the dark things that happen in your family. You need to confine them in a trusted and safe environment. The problem comes when keeping the secret becomes more important than getting an answer. It's when it's all about giving the right appearance, setting the right image, and nobody's talking about healing. Nobody's talking about deliverance. If we could just keep an air, if we can just maintain the image, the persona, then it doesn't matter if there's any sickness, neurosis, or dysfunction going on in our bodies. There are many dysfunctional families, and dysfunctional families is not something unique to modern times. It's not unique to American culture. Dysfunction is found way in the Bible, and you can find it very profoundly and intensely in the first family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One of the most dysfunctional families that you'll ever read about is our patriots, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their particular vices were favoritism and deceitfulness. Favoritism, picking sides. I love this one more than I love that one. I treat this one better than I treat that one. It's all through this family. Deceitfulness, lies, craftiness. And it starts with Abraham himself. We read of his story. In his travels, he tells his wife Sarah, when we go into Egypt, don't tell them you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister. The lie. Which, by the way, I often wonder, this woman is like over 90 years old. And Abraham was so worried that someone would be attracted to her. You know, people talk about, when I get to heaven, I want to meet Paul, I want to see Sarah. I mean, she must have been 90-something years old, and she's a heartbreaker. So Abraham instructs her to tell a lie. Don't tell them you're my wife. Just say you're my sister, so they don't kill me and try to take you. Then we get to Isaac, his son, and sure enough, he does the very exact same thing to his wife. We read in his story where he says, tell them you're my sister. Don't tell anybody you're my wife. So we see this deceitfulness, this lying, now crossing generations. By the time we get to Jacob, this guy is so good at lying that they actually name him Deceiver. the name Jacob means deceiver. He got deception down to a science. He was a master craftsman at fooling people. And so we see him in his journeys stealing the birthright from his own brother. We see him solidifying that deception at his father's deathbed, along with his mother, by the way. And eventually stealing, tricking his dying father into passing on the blessing. So we see the deception that actually travels through the generations. Now, Jacob, the master deceiver, has 2 wives. And each of those wives have a slave wife, a slave handmaid. And Jacob has 12 sons through 4 women. 2 of them that are sisters. And we see dysfunction mastered by these 2 sisters, Leah and Rachel. Leah is the oldest one, and Jacob, being in a family of favoritism, does not like her, doesn't love her, prefers Rachel. And so now we've got 2 sisters, blood sisters, at each other's throats. Now look at what happens as they start their family. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. It's interesting that the favoritism was so intense here and so brutal that God himself intervenes on behalf of Leah. The Lord saw that she was unloved, so he allows her to have children. Well, what does Leah do? Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and she named him Reuben. Now, the name Reuben means, behold, a son. Now, why did she pick this name? Was it a nice-sounding name? Was it named after her grandfather? No, it says she named him Reuben, but she said, the Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me. So the naming of her son had nothing to do with the son. It had everything to do with her broken relationship with her husband. It goes on. She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son and named him Simeon. Now Simeon means here. And there it says, for she said, the Lord heard that I was unloved and he has given me another son. Then she became pregnant a 3rd time and gave birth to another son and named him Levi. Now the name Levi means joined or connected. Well, she said, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons. So you see what's happening here. She's passing on her problems with her husband onto and through her children. When it comes to the 4th son, once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son, and she named him Judah. Now, Judah means praise, and here it sounds like she's kind of getting it together. Well, she said, now I will praise the Lord, and then she stopped having children. So it sounds like a good thing, but in the context, it's not a good thing. She's now gloating over her sister's misery. We know this because it keeps on going. It doesn't stop. So Rachel comes in now. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan. Now Dan means judged. And she says, "For God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son." Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali. And that name means struggle. And she says, "I have struggled hard with my sister and I am winning." That's dysfunction. It had everything to do with their relationship with the husband and the relationship with the sisters. And now they're passing on their struggles, their dysfunctions, and giving them to their children. I could only imagine what dinner time must have looked like for this family when they had company over and someone says, "Wow, that's an interesting name. How did you come up with that name?" And they would say, "Well, you see, my mother was abused by his mother, and so they named me this." It is no wonder that these sons would in turn likewise project their dysfunction on each other and end up trying to kill Joseph first and then selling him out to slave owners. You can have many kinds of dysfunctions. It doesn't have to be in a family. You can be in a social setting that is dysfunctional. You can be in a church that is dysfunctional. I'm preaching hard now. You can be in a number of circumstances that are dysfunctional. Here in our story, we see a broken and a dysfunctional environment. Let's look at the text here. It says, "There was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem." Now there in Jerusalem by the sheep gate is a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. Now Bethesda means a house of mercy. So, in other words, it had all of the expectations of healing. It seemed to be the right place to be if you're hurting, if you're in need, if you're broken. Let's go to the house of mercy. But while this had the expectation of deliverance, there was little to no healing happening there. In these lay a great multitude of sick people. So picture this and understand. You have a place here where nothing but sick people are all around you. Blind, lame, blind, paralyzed. A bunch of sick people are around you. Something happens when the only people in your life have the same problems as you do. If you are the smartest person you know, then you need more people in your life. If you are the most spiritual person in your life, you need more friends. You need other people in your life. If you are the richest person you know, you definitely need more people in your life. Because if you are the only one that got together and you are surrounded by a bunch of broken people, they can only take away from you. This man is in an environment where everyone around him is sick. Now something happens when you're in that kind of environment. You see, if I'm dysfunctional, if I'm twisted, if I have my sins and quirks about me, but everyone else has the same thing or even worse, then maybe I'm not too bad. And I don't have to focus on me because I'm in a place where everybody else is doing the same thing. And so you can't grow in any kind of environment. Where you are can be just as important as who you are. We talked about it before. Who are the people that you choose to have in your life? There are two kinds of people. People who God has assigned in your life, and people who you allow to be in your life. The Bible says, walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get into trouble. Questions like, are you learning? Is a fair question to ask. I'm trying to determine where you belong, where you're supposed to be. Am I growing? Or am I the same person I was 5 years ago? Am I experiencing God? Am I in a place that says healing, but there is no healing? I wouldn't want to be part of a church where everything that comes from the pulpit you already know. Sunday after Sunday, you're hearing the same message of what you heard 5 years ago. You can't grow in an environment like that. And then they'll say, well, I'm needed there. If I leave, what would happen? What would happen to my ministry? What would happen to my friends? But where you are needed is not always where you belong. This man is in an environment where everybody around him is broken. What else was there about this environment? It says, for an angel went down a certain time. It didn't happen all the time. It happened every once in a while. Every here and there, something would happen. The angel would go down, stir up the waters, and whoever stepped in first got healing. So what does this mean? You have to be in the right place at the right time, and you have to be the right person. Otherwise, you don't get healed. When you're in that kind of environment, everybody is suspicious of everybody else. When you get healed, they're not happy for you. They're not rejoicing when you rejoice. Because when you're in that kind of environment where only a select people can advance, only the right people can be promoted, then it becomes a dog-eat-dog environment. Then it becomes every man for himself. No one's lifting up one another in prayer. No one is rejoicing for their deliverance. They're focused on what's not happening with them. This man was there, it says, for 38 years. Now, understand the Bible tells us that Jesus himself was about 30 years of age when he started his ministry. The Gospel of John tells us that his ministry lasted for 3 years, so he died around the age of 33. This man is there and sick longer than Jesus Christ was alive, longer than he was on earth. Before he stepped onto Galilee, this man was there in this infirmity, with this sickness. Why do we insist on staying with things that don't work? Why do we insist on remaining in places that are not promoting growth? Why do we insist on holding on to people that just keep us down and prevent us from moving forward? Jesus came to this man and he says, "Do you want to be made well?" He asked the man one question: do you want to be healed? Do you want to get out of this situation? Are you tired of living with this thing? Do you want a change in your life? The man never answers Jesus' question. What does he say? "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool." Dysfunctional people will always blame other people for their lack, for their faults, for their sins. I'm this way because of her. I'm this way because of him. I'm like this because of the way I've been treated. I'm this way because of the way my family did me. You will never get what God has for your future by holding on to your past. When you're in a dysfunctional environment, a toxic environment, you're always ready to blame others and to look to others on why you're not getting everything that God wants you to have. Jesus tells this man, "Rise, take up your bed, and walk." And immediately the man was made well. You notice he didn't lay hands on him. He didn't make mud and put it on his head as he's done in other instances. He tells the man to do something that you think you can't do. Get up and walk. The church of God was never intended to be a house of victims. The church of God is intended to be a place of victory. There is nothing wrong with you coming in just as you are. We all come in broken. We all come in dysfunctional. But this is not a place to hang around year after year while nothing changes in your life, where no power becomes alive in your life. The thief comes except to steal, kill, and destroy. But I come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Jesus told this man to get up and walk. You've been down there long enough. You've been talking about everybody else and what's not happening for you. But I come to tell you that Jesus is not interested in you remaining in your dysfunction. We all come with our brokenness. We all come with our sins. I look back on my life and I see how broken I was. But God has reached down and He told me to get up and walk. It does not matter what your friends have done. It does not matter what kind of family you've come out of. It does not matter what has happened to you. It doesn't matter who hurt you. It doesn't matter who brought you down. Because Jesus Christ, it says, rise up and walk. And if you trust in me, He'll give you victory. There is nothing that you can get in that Jesus can't get you out of. When you're sick and down and out and you don't know which way to turn, He'll pick you up and He'll turn you around. When the devil said that nothing is going to change, you've been here too long, nothing is happening for you, I can say, goodbye world, I'm going on Jesus' side. Ain't got time to turn around. I found my joy. I'm going to, God, for my deliverance. I'm going to look, God, for my healing. I'm going to hold on for my joy.